Time now for the Sunday Talk. Tonight, the politics of entitlement. You heard suspended Senator Mike Duffy will be in court Tuesday facing some serious charges. But this week, another senator got us asking, are they all just out of touch?
The Senate chamber is magnificent. A beautiful sight in its setting of crimson carpeting and upholstery.
Like the House of Lords, the Senate was always a place of privilege, a public service for a chosen few, with a sweet salary and expenses paid.
It is a lifestyle. The job is a lifestyle.
Created in 1867, senators had to own at least $4,000 in property. Back then, a sign of serious wealth. The chamber of sober second thought worked quietly for the most part, until
what I didn't do was mind the shop properly.
The Senate scandal blew up. Pamela Wallin, Mike Duffy, Patrick Brazeau, Mac Harb, all investigated for allegedly claiming false expenses. This week, fresh headlines with reports the Auditor General is looking into the claims of many more senators.
No comment.
No comments.
I have absolutely no comment.
One senator did speak up.
And they say I should have not claimed because I should have eaten that breakfast. Well, those breakfasts are pretty awful. If you want ice cold camembert with broken crackers, have it.
Instead of sympathy, much mockery online about the horrors of improperly served cheese. So is every breakfast claim worth investigating? Or do some of these senators deserve more respect?
I just don't think they understand anything of what it's like to fly around the world to get here to Ottawa. They just don't know.
Let's rule out all the cheese puns to begin with. Yeah, well, we'll try anyway. So I'm joined by our panelists. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief of the Walrus magazine. John Moore is a talk radio host in Toronto. And Tasha Keratin is a columnist with the National Post and iPolitics. So Tasha, I'll start with you. Nancy Ruth is suggesting we should be more respectful, that we just don't get it. What do you think?
Okay, I'll get the pun out of the way. Canadians are cheesed off, and they have a right to be, though, because these senators are unaccountable. The senator that you quoted was saying it's a lifestyle. That's the problem in a nutshell, is that it is seen as a sinecure. It is seen as a place to go when you've raised a lot of money for your party. It is not seen as a place of sober second thought that it should be. And so I think because there's this lack of accountability, you get this kind of behavior, and Canadians have a right to be angry, and the auditor has a right to look into what they're doing.
What do you think, John?
Look, I agree that probably the words about the camembert were ill-chosen. However, that said, I think if you want to get quality people in the Senate, and that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about an effective Senate, trying to make it effective. How are you going to get smart people? You're not going to get smart, successful people by creating a system where you're going to create a witch hunt because someone doesn't take their breakfast on a flight. I think the last thing you'd want to do is make life difficult for smart people based on real nickel and dime stuff. If someone violates the public trust to the tune of 4 or 5 or 6 figures, okay, fine, investigate them. But why are we sending bean counters in to look at what people ate for breakfast? It's ridiculous.
Because, John, out of touch or...
Well, they are out of touch. Jonathan's talking about a lovely aspirational Senate, and I'd love to aspire to a better Senate, but we got what we got. And it's a bunch of bag men and nobodies and people who actually have been... Bag ladies, sure. People who have been on corporate credit cards, expense accounts, and eating cheese and complaining about the quality of their Gewürztraminer all their lives. So it should not come as a surprise to us. I mean, the only thing that comes as a surprise is that Nancy Ruth, the senator who said it out loud, because I think she thought the reporters would all go, you're right. Cold camembert.
But she is right.
That's awful.
She's right. Airline food can be crappy. And by the way, a lot of the people who are sneering at this woman are themselves corporate types who live on expense accounts.
And let me go there, because the corporate types have their expenses paid for indirectly, obviously, by the shareholders. They are accountable to someone, and if they go overboard, so to speak...
That's not true.
And they're also, John, they're also being paid salaries. They're not on the in public service, and I do think this is part of the problem. Public service is different. There is an accountability to the taxpayer. There's a certain respectability politicians are supposed to.
And there are some respectable senators, too.
Yeah, there are some.
They are not. Yeah. It is different. If you want to have an expense account and be in the corporate world, then go there. Don't go into public service. Don't accept the syndicate.
See, I disagree with you there, because I think we are this kind of nickel and diming thing. I mean, it's sort of the expectation the cabinet minister should sit and coach and take scheduled flights and carry their own bags. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, but
it's so small town.
Nancy Ruth, one example, comes from a very wealthy family and can certainly afford to pay for her camembert herself. Why is she nickel and diming the taxpayer?
But it's not just money, it's the time. What you do is you have a pocket full of receipts, you give it to your assistant. This is what's, look, I hate to be classist, this is what successful people do, whether in corporations or government. They take their receipts, they give it to an assistant.
They have people.
They have people. And by the way, look, it's not just people at the top of the food chain. I work at a magazine, right? They give me a corporate cell phone. At the end of the month, I take the bill and they pay it. Now, is every call on that bill, business related? No, it's not. However, I don't want some bean counter to go through the numbers. Oh, this looks like a personal call. You called your mom 3 times.
Well, you should do it yourself.
My mom's.
You can take those
really?
out. And
I'm going to take 2 hours every week with a highlighter?
Yes.
Well, then these organizations are penny wise and pound foolish because you're taking successful people and you're turning them into miniature bean
John,
counters. They're just wasting their time
I think if the Senate was seen to be doing more work and was seen to be playing a better role, people would have maybe more tolerance for these kinds of,
But why punish her for the sins of the Senate as a whole? I agree with you.
Well, because she had the silliness to say it out loud.
Exactly, she's the example.
But she's saying what everybody's thinking. I think
nobody's
she's a hero.
thinking about cold camembert.
I don't think everyone's thinking about camembert.
Look, you're the biggest snob on this panel. If I serve you I've known John for 15 years. I serve you the wrong kind of cheese. You'd be the first person to get up and walk out. And this whole issue turns people to hypocrites.
He's arguing that he wouldn't say it in front of the camera.
But the thing
Exactly.
is, people who don't eat camembert are paying for her camembert, and that is what
Successful people should eat good cheese. I don't see it as
pay for themselves.
But it's not a controversial statement. If you want to attract good people to lead this country, you shouldn't put on this small-town farce where you're going through their menu options and deciding what kind of cheese they should be eating. It's embarrassing.
I might have a better illustration for you. There was the CEO of the Pan Am Games was fired after people questioned his expenses. One of them was 91 cents in parking, and he was on.
Yes.
Well, that was the thing. It's how small the expense was.
Well, the pundits, the comics, everybody's made huge headlines out of this and had a lot of fun. But I want to move it on. We don't have to be completely serious. But does anyone benefit from this politically, Tasha? From this focus on the double dipping over breakfast?
Absolutely, and it's not necessarily who you might think. The fact that this came out the week before the trial of Mike Duffy, a senator who will be going on trial for fraud, actually, is very useful, in particular to the Conservatives, I think, because it broadens the net. It shows that, look, this is a bipartisan problem. You have senators appointed by Liberals, senators appointed by Conservatives, all behaving badly. It becomes a systemic issue. And I mean, Justin Trudeau's already washed his hands of his senators. The NDP never appointed any because they were never in power, and they've been asking for this.
So this is a sideshow that the Prime Minister might like?
I don't see how it hurts him all that much,
because we're not focusing on what was he good to go with Nigel Wright check
what
and
did he
so on.
say?
You're saying no.
I think it all folds
Can't be that
in. I mean, all of the misbehaving senators, nobody's differentiating whether it's over the expense accounts or over crimes and misdemeanors alleged. I think it reflects poorly on the Prime Minister as a guy who was promising to do something about the Senate. Obviously, he's powerless to do so, but he can't keep complaining about it when he appointed half of the people in it, and some of the worst of them are his appointments.
Justin Trudeau, he tried to disown his senators. I mean, does he come out of this looking better? I mean, some of the senators are allegedly Liberals, former Liberals.
Look, at the time, I think there were a lot of people who were critical of Trudeau for the move. They said he'd done it rashly. Sitting from where we are now, I think it was a pretty smooth move, because now you don't have people putting microphones in his face saying, are you going to throw this person out of the caucus? You're going to throw this person out of the caucus. He's washed his hands of it, and in hindsight, it was brilliant.
I think he did. It was very good when he did it. I don't necessarily think that it was as well calculated as some of his subsequent moves show. But the problem is now, actually, there's no party whip. There's no oversight of these folks. So in fact, they're sort of freer to do what they want in a sense. There's no sanction even from their own party because he's not there.
But
so that's a problem.
Should there be a party whip? If you're going to have a sober second thought, shouldn't you have people acting on their own individual conscience when they're presented with legislation? I think that's a good thing.
Well, it's one thing to act with legislation, but it seems they do whatever they want with their expense accounts too.
Well, it seems like we are stuck with it for a while. The Prime Minister, who said he wanted to reform or abolish it, went to the Supreme Court and asked them for a decision. This is what they said. The Supreme Court, ruled that a move to abolish the Senate would require the consent of all the provinces, the House of Commons, and the consent of the Senate itself. So, John, can you imagine? I mean, what's it going to take?
I mean, imagine whipping a vote, or not whipping a vote, having the assembly bells ring and reporting to Senate to abolish the Senate. If I can use a dairy metaphor for a second. I look at the Senate like this. It's not going to be an issue during the election. It's not even a very important issue to the average Canadian outside of the expenses. But for me, it's like a cup of bad yogurt that remains unopened in the refrigerator. It's still rotten, but you don't have to deal with it until you peel the top off.
How many more camemberts can we take? What should be done?
Well, what should be done is what can't be done, I think, which is that the House of Commons, that our parliamentarians act to abolish or reform the Senate. And it's so difficult to do. That's not going to happen. And I think the Canadian public is going to be angry, is going to be outraged. But at the end of the day, I agree. It won't be an election issue, and nothing will be done until the next time.
Will we ever be rid of this, do you think, John? Or what do you do in the meantime? Do you have maybe a gag order or not talk to the cameras?
In the meantime, I think you need prime ministers to start appointing people who are competent, who are not going to be propagandists for their party, as Mike Duffy, essentially was tasked to do. And this is not something that can be mandated constitutionally, but it has to be on the conscience of prime ministers to say, look, I'm going to appoint smart people.
But Harper has said there's absolutely no way he feels any real pressure to appoint anyone. I think there's 17, 18 openings, and they can all stay there until they're 75. At this rate, we've got another... Some of them are in their 40s.
The Supreme Court said you can't get rid of the Senate by attrition. So we can't simply not appoint anyone ever. Prime ministers do have to make the choices you're talking about. And I think in an ideal world, it would be great if they did. And some of the people they've appointed, I think, such as Pamela Wallin, for example, I don't think anyone would have expected this turn of events from someone with such a great career before. So you never know is the problem, too. You never know.
On a more serious note, not about breakfast claims, but Mike Duffy will be in court this week on serious charges. What will you be watching for on that, John?
Oh, I think like everybody, is he going to sing? If Mike Duffy gets up there on the stand, it's going to be operatic if he decides to try to take people down. A lot of people tell me that's probably not going to happen, but that's the drama we're looking for.
I'm looking for the smoking gun. And I think because expectations are so high, if we don't see it, if we don't see Nigel Wright singing and saying the Prime Minister called me at 2 in the morning and said, give him the check, I think that expectations won't be met and people will say this is a bust. It has to be at that level of tying to the Prime Minister. Anything short of that will not be very exciting.
What have you been watching?
The only reason I was excited about Mike Duffy is I thought here is the perfect poster boy for Senate reform. If this guy can't get us to reform the Senate, nobody can. But now the Supreme Court has said, well, we can't act on the impulse, so it's kind of become an anticlimax for me. I might not even watch the trial.
Well, you might be one of the few who don't. Apparently, they've got a room for standing-only showings on the side. And, yeah, apparently the Tim Hortons has hired extra staff.
But do they have a Timbit named for the trial? That would be the Duffy.
That's a sign of a really big trial. Thank you so much. We'll see what happens this week. Well, and the Duffy trial will go on for many, many weeks. Thanks so much. That was fun.